Hi guys, my name is Amish Tripathi and I'm the director of the Nehru Center. The Nehru Center is the cultural wing of the Indian High Commission in the UK, and we've been in existence for many decades, and we organize wonderful events at this very auditorium, which is in Mayfair in central London. Sadly, as you can see, the auditorium is empty. It has been empty since we were all put into lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic. But what we Indians believe is that the other side of a crisis is an opportunity. And what we have done at the Nehru Center is moved all our events online. So now, if you attend our online events, every single seat is a VIP seat. Like you get a front row at our events. No trouble of parking, no trouble of traveling all the way. And most practically all the programs that we would do, like literary discussions and dance performances, musical performances. We are doing them all on our online channels. You can register at for our newsletter at our website nehrucenter.org.uk. You don't need to write them down; they will be displayed at the bottom of the screen. You can also come to our Facebook page, which is a verified page, the Nehru Center. You can follow updates on all our events on Twitter as well, the Nehru Center. That's also a verified account, or you can come to our YouTube channel. Again, the Nehru Center. We are nothing if not consistent. I hope you do come to our online channels and enjoy the events that we're putting up for you. Thank you so much for all your love and support. Namaste. Jai Hind.
Namaste, Suswagatam, and welcome to this Pranayama Summit. We are diving deep into prana and pranayam, exploring the nuances of prana as accessed through and beyond breath. This is a journey of curiosity, of humble learning, and of gratitude for the love and the grace of the divine that is accessible in every moment. Joining us today is Shantala Sriramaya. Shantala, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Mirabel, thank you so much for asking me to be here. It's a great honor. Thank you.
Thank you. For those of you that are just getting to know Shantala, let me tell you a little bit about her. Shantala teaches Veda recitation to a growing global community of students through her online platform and classes. Inspired by her mother, Saroja, who taught chanting classes in their home for over 30 years, she's very grateful to the early exposure to Sanskrit chanting and Indian scriptures through her family tradition and school education. Born and raised in Bangalore, India, Shantala is an engineer by qualification and enjoyed a 20-year career specializing in learning and development before making the change to Veda chanting classes to continue her family tradition. Her teaching draws from her previous experience, bringing structure, detail, and clear objectives and methodology to all her classes and courses. She has developed a unique system to accurately and completely transmit all the nuances of Vedic phonetics to help support students to learn without error. She is a student of Sri M.S. Srinivasan of the Chalakeri brothers, who has been guiding her Veda recitation practice and mentoring her teaching. She lives in Brussels, Belgium, with her husband and two small children. And today, Shantala is, I'm not going to do the mantras because we have the expert in house. So Shantala is going to lead us into an invocation and then we'll begin our conversation from there. All yours, Shantala.
Mirabel, thank you so much. And thank you for acknowledging my mother and my guru. Thank you very much. So I'll do the invocation prayers for all of us. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Ganana Antva Ganapatigam Havamahe Kavim Kavinam Upamashrabastamam Jyeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspata Anashrinvannutibhisi Dasadanam Mahaganapataye Namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vajebhirvajini Vati Dhinama Vitriyavatu Ano Divo Brihataf Parvatada Saraswati Ajata Gantu Yajnam Havan Devi Jujushana Ghritachi Shagman No Vachamushati Shvanotu Vagdevyai Namaha Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you so much for that. I think everybody got a wonderful introduction to mantras pranayam just by listening to you chanting.
Exactly.
Shantala, can you share a little bit about how mantra is pranayam?
Sure. There are actually so many aspects to it. So I'll start with something very basic, which is, just pranayama as, as chanting as a process of exhalation. So when you're chanting, that's the most basic thing we are doing is exhalation. But something special is happening with that exhalation. So it's not just so simple as chanting an Om even. There's a little bit more happening, especially with Vedic chanting. There's a lot more going on. So, as you keep chanting, you keep extending this exhalation just by virtue of learning the mantra and reciting it, in logical blocks, about where to take a pause and where you sort of hold the syllables, grip the syllables, where you pause and where is the logical place to take a breath, and you take this quick inhalation and then you start a process of exhalation again. This is just very divine pranayama. And it's so clever because you don't have to, in a very mechanical way, keep track of, your count. You don't have to keep count and you don't have to do those things. It's already all wonderfully arranged through the Sanskrit mantras, so clever. And there's a lot more to it. So it's pranayama, but it's much more. So that's the basic, sort of explanation of how chanting can become chanting is pranayama. And there's things like, how the Sanskrit syllables interact, what type of syllables are there, what is the, process, the mechanics of sort of chanting those special type of syllables, and then what happens with the body when you do that. And of course, then on, above and beyond all this, there is not, I wouldn't call it an advanced practice, but it's a very basic practice in the Vedic tradition, using the Pranava Gayatri Pranayama, we call it. So it's it's not a loud recitation, but we memorize certain mantras and we recite a particular sequence for the inhalation, a particular mantra for holding, and a specific mantra again for the exhalation, which are somewhat equal in length. And it's a very, very powerful pranayama. So it's pranayama, of all of the mechanics involved in the pranayama, but there's more. There's another level to it. So that's the short answer.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that so precisely, because I think, and maybe you would want to speak maybe a little bit more about it, because, sometimes we think that when we're just singing bhajans, right, we're also prolonging an exhale. It's also calming the vagal nerve. It's also, bringing a lot of benefits. It's opening the heart. But there's something different about Vedic chanting compared to just singing bhajans or singing mantras in any tune, so to speak. Can you share a little bit about that distinction, please?
Sure. It's one of my favorite sort of topics to bring up, especially, I speak a lot about this when I'm initiating people into Vedic chanting, because there's a lot of, let's say, vocabulary that we have about mantra singing, Vedic chanting, Vedic mantra singing, so there's a lot of vocabulary. And that is the first thing I try to sort of resolve for people when they start studying with me. So, so there's singing and there's chanting or recitation of Vedic mantras, which are two completely different practices. They're both important for, they serve their purposes. But with Vedic chanting, what we are saying is, in fact, we should even stop calling it Vedic chanting, and we should start calling it Veda chanting or Veda recitation. Because this umbrella of Vedic, is sort of broad. It can be anything. It can be Yoga Sutras, it can be Bhagavad Gita, because they're all Vedic. But the chanting of those texts is not necessarily what, you and I are referring to as Vedic chanting. So, for the purpose of this, session here, we will equate the two. We'll say Vedic chanting is the same as Veda chanting. But the difference is that Veda chanting is the chanting of texts from the Veda. Not just in the Vedic umbrella, but the actual chanting of either Rig Veda or Sama Veda or Yajur Veda or Atharva Veda texts. That is Veda chanting. And in fact, even Veda chanting is sort of a little bit redundant. It's like Starbucks, it's like saying chai tea, because tea, chai is tea. So Veda is Shruti, the sound, and the sound is through the chanting. So, studying Veda chanting is studying Veda. The rigor of how you express that Veda mantras, there is a framework of it, and the very basic framework, is from the Taittiriya Upanishad. And I think people are quite familiar with it, which, there's swara, starting with varna, swara, matra, balam, sama, santanaha. There are certain rules that we follow to chant the Veda. So without that swara, for example, swara is like an intonation. We follow three swaras. We follow a middle note, half note up and half note down. So we sort of stay in this range of chanting, unlike music, which is using, 7 notes and all these creative sort of ranges within those notes. We don't have that in Veda chanting. We stay within these 3 notes. And there are certain nuances to those 3 notes, depending on the text and depending on the mantra, etc. and we stay in that. It creates a very meditative, let's say trance-like effect. So that's the first thing. And these swaras are set. These mantras have been revealed to rishis who, through their spiritual discipline, had a vision and transcribed that vision into these very clever mantras for all of us to benefit from. So by following that swara exactly, precisely, we are following the path of the rishis, the yoga of the rishis, and we receive the blessings of the rishi. And what we are trying to do is to have that same vision the rishis had, so we can understand the realities of the universe. And so we can navigate this world intelligently, harmoniously, like the rishis did. So we follow the swaras exactly. So if one syllable is half note up, it has to be that way. One syllable is half note down, it has to be exactly in that spot, up and down. So there isn't, while learning, it's not a practice you relax into. It's a practice you wake up to, and you're alert in, and you stay alert, and you stay concentrated. There are certain syllables that are aspirated, some are not. We follow that precisely. There are exact positions where we have to pause. I mean, I can give examples, but it will get too technical. But just to give you an example of, just to give you an idea of the rigor, that it's not as easy as just reading a text. You have to understand what conjunct consonants are in Sanskritam. And each conjunct consonant is sacred in Vedic chanting. The starting sound of each conjunct is doubled. This is called dvitva, and there are numerous such rules. So beyond this framework of 6 rules of varna, swara, matra, balam, sama, santanaha, there are various other nuances that we learn from our guru in the oral tradition, and we follow that precisely. And to follow that precisely, you need to be in a quiet space, full quietude, be able to listen accurately, replicate exactly, and correct where not perfect, and keep repeating that process. Through this process, we develop such a razor sharp concentration, like I personally have never experienced before in any other practice. So I don't know if this has fully answered what is the difference between sort of, enjoying the sangha of musical mantra, sort of session or practice, versus what we do in Vedic chanting, which is a very solitary, practice where you have to really perfect each syllable precisely. So
Yes, totally answer the question, Shantala, and very beautifully so. And thank you for bringing that up, because I think there's a lot of maybe misinformation, or just not knowing, just not knowing, around it, and then that causes a lot of confusion. In terms of, yeah, there's just so many melodies. People are singing like Gayatri in 50 different ways, and then students are confused, and then you get hooked on to a particular way of singing it, and then it's very hard to unlearn that. And unlearning is so hard. So thank you for bringing all that in. And I think perhaps later we could go into some examples just to give a sense of of what that would look like in practice. But when you share all of this, I'm thinking that a viewer is probably, someone who's watching is thinking, oh my God, this sounds like too much. Like, I don't know, can I, like, it sounds very militant almost. And so I would like for you to share maybe a little bit about, traditionally how we learn this. And you have learned it traditionally just growing up around your mom chanting. And there's something beautiful about just being in that environment, that you don't have to make a forced effort as much, perhaps, to to learn because you're surrounded by it. So if you could just share your journey with this, growing up, learning, and how it organically happens. So maybe that will be inviting to those that are interested in Veda chanting.
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, indeed, when I do tell people upfront, that if you're looking for a practice where you want to relax and sort of lose tension and that sort of thing, maybe you need to start with a different practice at first, because learning Vedic chanting or Veda chanting, it's like the equivalent of learning a new language. So you have to be fully engaged, fully alert, fully awake. So, that's, so instead of telling people that, it's militant or it's strict, what I tell people is I need your 100% concentration and alertness. Are you able to offer that right now to this practice? Because that's what, our offering to the divine in Veda chanting is that. We offer this level of concentration, we offer this level of preciseness, and that is the offering to the divine. So that's my sort of perspective on it, and yet people come. So I'm so far it's okay, but it's true that it's not a practice for everyone. It's so, and there's no shame in that or something. There is nothing bad in that. It's just for it's for people who can handle taking adjustments. You didn't do this right. So it's one of the oldest error correcting traditions. So oldest you'll find in terms of error correction, it's the oldest methodology, system, technology, so to speak. So you should be okay with constantly getting feedback that, this up note here, down note here. So it's very precise. And so it's not for everyone, but once you get into it, the feedback I have is that it's such an addiction. And there is such a natural draw to the practice. Yeah. And for me, indeed, like I grew up in the environment. My mother was a chanting teacher, although she didn't teach Veda because back in the day, in her generation, in that time, women were not initiated. I'm the first woman in my family to be teaching Veda on top of what my mother, etc., used to teach in the family. So it's a big thing. In India, it's still a very big thing. And I'm very grateful that I have gurus who initiate and teach women, and they follow the Veda, because the Veda doesn't say anywhere that women shouldn't chant it. So this is another huge, from an Indian perspective, it's a big misconception. But of course, outside of India, people are very, very open to learning and teaching and all of that. So my mother was a teacher, and I literally grew up around chanting classes, and perhaps I can share some visuals that will sort of help understand the type of environment I grew up in. For example, and you were talking about the Gayatri Mantra, I sort of learned it when I was 7 or 8 years old in preparation for this ceremony that you see. So this is my brother, who's now, 50, and he's maybe 10 or something in this picture, and is sitting in between my parents. And this is a very precious, sacred ceremony to initiate a young person into Vedic studies. And we do this through the initiation with Gayatri Mantra, because Gayatri Mantra is considered such a brightening sort of, it's the mantra where we ask for clarity of thinking, so we can be propelled, inspired towards right thinking. What a great start, right, to learning, and being initiated into the Vedic tradition. So, and so this picture was maybe from 1979 or 1980, and this is more recent, so it's 2000 something. It's a picture of my cousins initiating my nephew. this tradition continues in our family. It's been going on for and for millions of other families. It's been going on for generations. So the whole practice of Gayatri Mantra is a very sacred practice. It's not just something to relax about, but it is something we are starting off by letting our young ones know through this initiation that our purpose in life is eventually Brahma Vidya. And in order to achieve, this Brahma Vidya, or, the goal of the Vedic spiritual discipline, that the Gayatri Mantra is your best companion. Because through Gayatri, we clarify and clear all, doubts, and we clear any obstructions that are in the path. And we let our own sort of inner light, inner sun to rise. And so, and besides that, you'll see a picture on the left of my mother's chanting class. She's the lady in pink, leading a group of women. She used to teach Bhagavad Gita, and she taught Lalita Sahasranama and Saundarya Lahari and Shivananda Lahari. She was one of the biggest devotees I know of Devi. And our home in India is called Sri Mata, after the first name of, in the Lalita Sahasranama, the first name. And, I grew up around those Vedic ceremonies. You see on the top right, 4 Vedic priests, along with my parents, performing our annual our yajna at home. And we did this, I think, for 30 or 40 years. I can't remember. Every year, the whole neighborhood would come. And it would just happen in our living room. We would just set it on fire. But I grew up around this. And the picture you see on the bottom right is several years after my mother has passed away. Her friends, her students, our family still gather every first Friday of the month to continue what she had started, which is, they spend about 2 hours chanting all these Devi mantras they learned from her. And my father, organizes these events. You can see him on the right, the picture right on the right. You see one gentleman amongst all those women there. That's my father. And he organizes these events. He invites everyone, opens up the house for them to come and do all the chanting that used to happen in our home. So even though my mother was a chanting teacher, etc., I still had chanting teachers, because, Veda chanting was not something your families may be, experts at. Even though you grow up in the tradition, it's still very important to learn it from a scholar, from a vidwan, we say. So, I have had the great honor. I mean, I don't even know. I don't have words, honestly, to describe my good fortune and luck that I get to study one-on-one. I'm one of a small handful of students that Guruji Srinivasan of the Challakere brothers teaches one-on-one. Everyone else learns in a group with him. But I'm one of the few who got to study with him one-to-one. And so, it was a little bit like, I don't know if you're old enough to know these movies, the Karate Kid movies, but, I'm kind of old, so that's my analogy here. So, in Karate Kid, he goes to this teacher, and for a long time, he has to clean the car, and he has to polish the car. He has to do all these household chores and all these other things. It was a little bit like that for me. I did a lot of other, he made me learn Lalita Sahasranama and then Vishnu Sahasranama, and then I'm learning Aditya Hridayam, and then, so many other things. And then, he saw that, okay, so she's really serious, because 1 year later, I was still there waiting. And then he initiated me into, Veda mantras, and I've been a student ever since. I've studied a lot with him. And with the family, in fact, also with his wife, with his daughter, they substitute when he's not there. And so for me, it's been, really a non-stop exposure to this tradition, even though I've had this life where I got an engineering degree and went into corporate and, had a 20-year career in the technology sector. But on the backdrop of it, I think what I received from my family is what we would call samskaras. It's this inherent attitude towards these spiritual practices and the value that we give it, in our daily life and in our own personal development and in our well-being. I think this is the most important sort of platform that I've had, and I'm very fortunate. Yeah.
Yes, you absolutely are. It's like massive good karma. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It was, I think it was really wonderful to have all the pictures and, on the journey. And I, particularly want to, emphasize a little bit this aspect of learning that we have in India with the guru, that first you sweep the floor, or you you make the chai, or you do like all of that, and they kind of don't even acknowledge that you exist for a long time sometimes. And then if you're ready, not when you think you're ready, because you can pay the money, or you can I always feel there's that difference, because here it's like you sign up for a course to do this, right? So you pay, therefore you can sign up. So the eligibility is the ability to pay, or a scholarship, or whatever it is. But it's different when we learn traditionally. And yeah, I'm separately from this conversation, it would be interesting to talk about how that would unfold for the present and the future continuous, as the world evolves and changes. Um, I was wondering if you could share some examples of where prana is mentioned in the Veda, and if there are any Veda mantras that you might recitate around prana and just share about.
I mean, absolutely. Prana is mentioned extensively in the Aranyaka and Upanishad texts. Many Upanishads mention working with prana, as a vehicle to realization, self-realization, as the vehicle towards this Vedic discipline, the goal of this Vedic discipline. But also, I mean, there are some very beautiful mantras where Pranavayu is the deity that is being worshipped. I find this stunningly beautiful and inspiring, because we are praying to prana to infuse and nourish all of our vital energies, the 5 different vital energies that we have, so we can be balanced, and so we can be eligible, like using the words that you use, it's an eligibility for Brahma Vidya. Again, everything is always geared towards your ascending levels of consciousness, and along the way to also live fully, joyfully, and in a healthful way. So there are many mantras actually, and also in the Rig Veda. And of course, we have to glean this information, because the Rig Veda is always very secretive and cryptic. But Rig Veda also talks about, the Shakti, the power through which, prana was even like manifested at the manifestation stage. So I think what I'd like to do is maybe share the text, so it becomes, people can see the text, and it's a bit more useful to actually look at the text. Yeah, so I think I have some examples here. I just found them. Hold on. Because I just remembered you do need to share the screen, not just the PowerPoint. This is one of my favorite examples, is the Ayur Mantra. Ayur Mantra, and it's from the Taittiriya Aranyaka. The Aranyaka texts are absolutely exquisite. They're called forest texts, and you can just visualize the rest in terms of, the type of where you're transported to when you are chanting these mantras. And there's also, I just remembered now, the Arogya Mantra as well. But let's look at this Ayur Mantra. I teach this to a lot of students, especially if you're recovering from illness. I used it myself, in fact, when I recovered from a very serious illness, and I used it to build up my own prana. I was barely able to even chant at that time when I was recovering, but I used it. I started by chanting it silently and then started chanting it more, over the months. It has been such a great companion. I share it with a lot of people. And it's basically in this mantra, we are saying, oh prana, bless me with ayuhu, with a long life, and with pranavayu, with apanavayu, with vyanavayu, nourish my pranavayus, nourish also my sight, my hearing, my mind, my speech, and make all of this very well established, not only in me, but in everyone. And I'll just chant this mantra so you can, experience what it sounds like. And you can hear some of the, what are some elements physiologically that make you improve sort of your inner strength, so to speak, your prana, what we call in Vedic. Om Ayurdhehi Pranandhehi Apanandhehi Vyanandhehi Chakshurdhehi Shrotrandhehi Manodhehi Vachandhehi Atmanandhehi Pratishthandhehi Mandhehi Mayidhehi. So basically we are saying Ayurdhehi. So this word Dhehi is so beautiful. It comes from the root verb dha, which means to hold something. And Dhehi is to really, give in me, sort of hold for me and bestow upon me, bless me with, nourish, in other words. So nourish my entire lifespan, give me a long lifespan. This long lifespan is very important in the Vedic tradition. If you're, as an Indian, if we take blessings from our elders, they say so salgio, which is live, may you live to be 100, which means that, may there be ample opportunity and time for you to develop spiritually. So you need that time to develop. So this Ayu is very important. And also Pranandhehi, give me this Prana Shakti. Give me also strength, nourish my Apanavayu, nourish also my Vyanavayu. And while 3 Vayus are mentioned here, 3 Pranas are mentioned here, it's inherently understood that all the 5 Pranavayus are nourished. My Pranavayu, my Apanavayu, Samanavayu, Vyanavayu, and Udanavayu, which are sort of all the subtle energetic movements, what we call prana in the body. Let them all be nourished and balanced. And further, nourish also my sight, nourish also my hearing, chakshuhu and shrotram, and nourish also my mind, manodhehi, and nourish my speech, vachandhehi. And may my most innermost being, Atma, be nourished. And may all of these things be pratistham. May all of these things be well established in me and in everyone. So this is just such a beautiful prayer. And I can keep chanting this like a japa, although it's not a mantra for japa, but I really enjoy just the humble ask, for grace, for nourishing these qualities, nourishing these subtle energies in us, so we can have the strength for our own spiritual practice and life, because the Veda, of course, doesn't make this artificial distinction between your life and your spiritual life. So nourish your life, which is your spiritual life. So yeah, so this is basically the sort of summary of this mantra is bestow upon me all of these Shaktis, this Prana Shakti in me. In the Mahanarayana Upanishad, I'll just chant one part of it. There is an entire, Viraja Homa. It's one part of it, and one entire section is basically called Arogya Mantra, which means a mantra for health. And here as well, we are praying Pranapana Vyano Dana Samana Me Shuddhyantan Jyotiraham Viraja Vipapma Bhuya Saggaswaha. So you see the words there, Prana Pana Vyano Dana Samana is basically Prana, Apana, Vyana, Udana, and Samana. So Shuddhyantam, may all of these be purified. And may I be freed from Viraja, may I be freed from Vipapma, from all obstacles that stop me from me becoming the Jyoti, the light. So the Vedas have the most most beautifully inspiring prayers, and every time I see these prayers, I'm like, I have to chant this every day and I have to chant that every day. So I have a 3-hour practice every day because all of them are so inspiring and beautiful,
Yeah.
So I have the text only in Sanskrita here, but I'll just maybe chant a small portion of it. I just thought maybe there will be people who appreciate seeing a text in Devanagari, how it's traditionally learned. So this is from the very famous and powerful Taittiriya Upanishad. And in the second chapter, which is called Dvitiya Brahmanandavalli, here, so the prana here is again presented, as saying actually that whatever life exists, man, animals, all objects, beings are all basically dependent upon prana for life. And without that prana, there is no life. And this is what this section is basically, informing the learner. Om Pranan Deva Anuprananti Manushya Pashavasjaye Prano hi bhutanāmayuh tasmāt sarvāyushamuchyate sarvamevata ayuryanti ye pranam brahmopasate prano hi bhutanāmayuh. So I won't chant the whole thing, but basically it's an upasana, it's a meditation that if we meditate upon this prana, we can have the full ayuhu, the full lifespan. So in other words, develop your inner prana for us to have that lifespan and for us to have a full chance at working, fully on our spiritual life, basically. So this is, some examples. And, I was speaking about this is one of the most magnificent hymns from the Rig Veda. I won't chant it, the Nasadiya Suktam. But here, you have to glean from it, the thing about prana, because this is the hymn of creation. And it speaks about how there was neither non-being nor being. There was neither asat or sat. Neither was there, airy space, neither were there heavens beyond, and there was nothing basically. And neither was there death nor immortality. And then the one, even without a breath, the one breathless, breathed by intrinsic power. This intrinsic power is basically prana, the universal prana. And so many of the Vedic, the Vedas speak consistently about prana and about developing prana as a vehicle for higher consciousness. There's numerous examples. These are just a few to illustrate.
Thank you so much for all of those. I actually love a lot of them and can listen to them over and over. And you were right when you said it's kind of addictive, like you can't stop. And then it goes on in your sleep, and it just kind of like realize, okay, I need to be getting to deep sleep. Stop listening to the mantra in my head, but it doesn't stop. So, yeah, thank you for all of those examples and for chanting them. It's so important, I think, to bring these textual scriptural examples into our awareness, so that we know that it's not just like this abstract, like sort of romantic idea of prana, but there's like, it's very precise and it's very defined, and it's in the context of many other in many texts and in relationship with in different ways. In Sanskrit, the alphabets are called akshara, right? And it's very interesting to me because even when I'm teaching him, like, alphabet and akshara, like there's no comparison. How do you convey so and based on their sound, they're like alpa, they call alpa prana or maha prana. So they're not like alphabets, like how could you explain that a little bit, so that people can have an understanding of what is akshara and then the alpa and maha pranas?
Sure, I will be happy to. I'm not a Sanskritist, and I know many who will give a much more beautiful answer than I can. But I will speak to the syllables, and especially this, the Alpa Prana, Mahaprana. I mean, the Sanskrit alphabet is one of the most magnificently arranged system, In fact, maybe I should share the Sanskrit alphabet on the screen so I can talk through it as well, because it really makes sense to look at some of the syllables as I'm talking through it. Let me just quickly find it. I'm sure I always have one handy. I call it my magic sheet, because through one sheet you can really see all the beauty of the Sanskrit syllables. Yeah, I just found it. Can you see that clearly? I'll just
Yeah,
just full screen.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll just do that. So you can you see that screen now?
Yes.
Full screen now. Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm not going to go through the entire alphabet here, but there's some small things I want to bring to pay attention to here, is that what you spoke about first of all is this alpa prana mahaprana, because this is directly related to prana and pranayama, as we speak about Vedic chanting as a pranayama practice, as a clever, naturally arranged pranayama. You see in the right half of the sheet is basically the consonant sounds. So, and they're in 5 rows, so starting from ka, kha, ga, gha, nga, cha, cha, ja, jha, nya, and so on. You see that the first column there, ka, cha, ta, ta, pa, we call these alpa prana. You can see the heading there. It says alpa prana, or unaspirated. And alpa prana means you're sort of using a gentle life force to pronounce it. A, ka, cha. You're not exerting yourself. But for these mahaprana sounds, you have to bring your best inner prana strength to create that sound. Ka, cha, ta, tha. And it's not aspiration from the lips or the throat. It's aspiration from inside. You have to engage your abdomen and make the sound. Your entire being has to, you're like, if you're an empty vessel, your whole being should resonate with these sounds. You should thunder, my teacher used to say, with these sounds. And for each of these sounds, ka, kha, there is clear physiological difference. When you say ka, it's a process of sort of contraction. But when you do ka, it's expansion. Ga, contraction again. Ga, expansion continuously. So with these sounds, you're doing pranayama naturally. In fact, they say you can just chant the Sanskrit alphabet and you're doing pranayama. You know, with Vedic chanting, you add to that pranayama with swara and matra, you know, through chandas, you know, the prosody, the number of meter, the number of syllables in each meter, the rhythmic quality. It lends more power to, you know, movement, which prana feeds on, you know, and therefore you see how it's the language of Sanskrit is so naturally suited for improving your prana, for growing the prana in you through its inherent quality. And it's called akshara because these akshara means to destroy, you know, to annihilate. And akshara is something that cannot be annihilated. And these sounds are, you know, resonating in nature. And that's why a lot of people, when they listen to or participate in Sanskrit chanting, even if it's not Vedic chanting, there's a certain attraction they feel, you know, they feel a certain calmness, a certain resonance with, you know, what is happening in nature. And it's just an immediate response to feel calm as a result. So this Alpa Prana, Mahaprana is one of, you know, distinguishing factors in chanting. And we follow it very precisely. And there is a very good feeling of chanting with powerful Mahaprana sounds. It feels like you're expelling, you know, expelling sort of everything that is in you. That is, you know, your kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya is all just being expelled from you as you chant these Mahaprana sounds. And of course, each of these rows of consonants are arranged like in the way you would use where the tongue is situated, you know, in the mouth. And it's not so in other languages, you know, A and B and C are not arranged in that kind of way, but here ka, kha, ga, gha, you know, that whole family of sounds, the sound is coming from a particular location. And the next row is all coming from another location and coming from another location. And these are all, it's so precise, so beautifully arranged. But I think that was my very long answer to your Alpa Prana, Mahaprana question. But mainly, there is this physiological process of, you know, holding, expanding, which is so conducive, you know, which is what is the natural pranayama of chanting.
Yeah, thank you. That visual was so beautiful. I've never seen such a good visual of all the of the Devanagari, I mean the Sanskrit alphabet before. So that's a really wonderful, systematic, and very clear, you know, depiction of all of that. And you know, as you were speaking about the Mahaprana, and you know how we kind of are expelling you know, whatever is not needed. I was just reminded of my daughter learning the Gayatri Nyasa, like Astraya Phat, like she, you know, because she was doing the whole, and she just got so much of a kick out of doing that. And you can see how naturally also, you know, even children take to it. So beautiful. It's just like you said, there's something so natural about it. It's not a construct. It's divination of something that already exists. I'm wondering if you can give us, if you would mind giving us just an example of, you know, something with the Mahapranas, just so people can feel the energy of that. Yeah.
Well, just to chant maybe something familiar is, you know, even the Shanti Mantra, Bhadrang Karne Bhihi, has a lot of, you know, you can feel the power in it because of the Mahaprana sounds. Maybe I'll chant that. And, you know, it sort of speaks for itself. It's a great advertisement for the Mahaprana sounds. So, Om Bhadrang Karne Bhishrunuyama Devaha Bhadram pashyemakshabhiryajatraha Sthirairangai sastanubhihi Vyashema devahitai yadayuhu Swasti na indro vridhashrabaha Swasti na pusha vishwavedaha Swasti nastarkshyo arishtanemihi Swasti no brihaspatirdadhatu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Another example is actually Gayatri Mantra, because a lot of people miss the Mahaprana sounds, and maybe I should sort of share that quickly, just because it's one of the most popular mantras. I mean, there's literally nobody who doesn't know it. And but people miss the Mahaprana sounds in it, as taught by Vedic Pandits, like the Challakere brothers. So let me share that, because this is really, I consider this a good service in sharing. So I do a lot of events where I share, this the Vedic phonetics, so to speak, of the Gayatri Mantra. And you see the syllables that are colored in red are your Mahaprana sounds. And you'll see that in Tat Savitur, normally this is never taught. Whenever you have these two sounds meeting, the sa meeting, it becomes an aspirated sound. So the recitation of Gayatri Mantra, and also people, chant Bhur Bhuvas Suvaha instead of a Bhur Bhuvas Suvaha, so it's Bhuhu Bhuvaha Suvaha, that becomes Bhur Bhuvas Suvaha. So if I can just chant this once, the aspirated sounds, the Mahapranas, will again be, it's a good demonstration of it. Let me say divine demonstration. Om Bhur Suvaha Tathaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. So the complexity in Vedic chanting is that not that they're just Mahaprana sounds, but that you have to do these sounds in the middle of chanting. So it's not like, it's more than pranayama, because in pranayama, you just do unrestricted inhalation, hold, and unrestricted exhalation. But in chanting, you have to, while you're exhaling, you have to also do these spikes of exhalation in order to get the Mahaprana sounds right. Bhur Bhuvas Suvaha, and still have enough energy. This is what is creating inner strength, improving your digestion. So many things are happening when you're chanting it, precisely.
I think we could just go on forever. I'm forgetting all my questions. Can you, you were speaking about Gayatri and the chandas. So my teacher taught me that Brihati Chanda represents prana. Can you share a little bit about the chandas? And I know you briefly alluded to them a little earlier, but how do the chandas work in terms of the effect on prana and consciousness? And perhaps Brihati in particular, if that feels relevant.
Yeah. I mean, when you mentioned this, then Brihati, has a specific effect on the way I study or have been taught things is to basically through mantras. So if we learn something about chandas, it's also through the mantras of the Vedas or from the Vedanga text. So from the Shiksha texts for the pronunciation, and from chandas, for learning about chandas, etc. So within that, we don't find specific information on, how it impacts the mood or consciousness and things. But in the mantras of the Rig Veda, we have precious information that then links to what the chandas does. So first of all, what is chandas? Chandas is the prosody, or the the number of syllables that you find within each mantra. In fact, Gayatri, that we were talking about, it gets the mantra gets its name not because it's a prayer to Gayatri. The mantra gets its name because of the meter it is cast in, and it is a powerful vehicle to transport this mantra. So therefore, by that definition alone, chandas itself becomes like a core prana, because it's about movement. In fact, if chandas was a person, Veda Purusha, we say, if Veda was a person, chandas would be the feet, because it gives movement to the mantra. This is the prana of the mantra. And therefore, obviously, all the different meters will all have different, energies, different, it performs different qualities. And the Rigveda, one of the Rigveda hymns of creation tells us that it associates different deities with different meters. For example, Gayatri, the deity for Gayatri is Agni, which means that when we are chanting mantras of Gayatri, there is an upliftment, because it's a quality of fire. You light a fire, it goes up, points upward, takes you up, immediately it brings you to other devatas, and so on. And a meter, like I'm trying to recollect, a meter like Trishtub, for example, there are about 7 famous meters in Veda. One mantra like chandas like Trishtub is associated with Indra, which means that it is a great mantra when you're working on your inner prana, on your inner indriyas, control of your indriyas. Those are mantras very suitable for that. Of course, the mantra itself, we have to see what the mantra is. But that is the energy associated with Indra, is the building of stable bodies, both physical and subtle, And Brihati is associated with Brihaspati. So we have to understand Brihaspati. And unlike in the Puranas, where Brihaspati is associated with, the sort of Jupiter, it's not so in the Vedas. Brihaspati is associated more with Brahmanaspati, Ganapati, Brihaspati are all the same deity, basically the Lord of all mantras, of all word, basically. So obviously Brihati is going to be, balancing. It's the mantra does, which is your inner transformation. And Brihaspati is the Lord of all these mantras. He's the Lord of the word. So Ganapati, Brahmanaspati, Brihaspati are associated with the chandas of Brihati. And so you have those effects. It directly impacts all chandas by default, have a direct impact on prana because of the movement associated with it. So you see, even the chanting of Gayatri Mantra, therefore, without the chandas, without the swara, it's no longer Veda, because Veda is defined by this chandas. In other words, Veda is this prana of the chandas. In fact, we even call Veda as one of the synonyms for Veda is chandas. Because without this prana, without this rhythmic movement, there is no Veda. It is this rhythmic movement. It is the swara. So that is another very big difference. So it's like a double answering of this question and the one before it, which was to do with the difference between singing Gayatri and reciting it in this way. One is Veda and one is not.
Yeah, wonderful. And thank you for sharing that about, because often there's in the modern day, there's such a reverence for the written text, which is beautiful, of course. It's nice that we can have things written and sort of in a solid way, accessible at any time. But when we're reading the Veda and reciting the Veda, there's that huge difference, which you just kind of really gave a voice to, how really the prana is not, it's not there. And I love that analogy of the feet. The chandas are like the feet. It's so vivid and so perfect, beautiful. We mentioned Agni many times, and we also talk about, you know, the Agnis in the body, and the Jatar Agni and the Pran Agni. And can you speak a little bit about the significance of Agni in the Veda, and perhaps in relationship with, you know, why are we starting so many things with Agni, and then what's the relationship to Prana, its relationship to Prana? Yeah.
You know, our rishis of the Vedic ages were very, very clever people. They knew exactly the importance of Agni in your life, in your, you know, spiritual life. Actually, we should just say life, because the Veda doesn't say only spiritual life. The Veda says that through the mantras of the Veda, you can divinize your life, whatever that life is, whether you're a businessman, a carpenter, yoga teacher, or a housewife, whatever. You can divinize that life. And how do we divinize that life? We start becoming aware of these Vedic deities, gods, cosmic forces, whatever you want to call them. And Agni and Indra take a very sort of important role in the Vedas. Not that they're more important than the other deities. It's not such a thing, because all these deities basically resolve into one in the end. They're all aspects of the same one divine. But when we are beginning our spiritual journey, we need Agni and Indra more than we need other deities at that point. And once we have built a relationship with Agni, and we have worked with Agni, and we have worked with Indra, then we can call upon and work with other deities. That's just how it works. But Agni is of prime importance. 400 odd rishis and rishikas in the Vedas, all of them start with mantras to Agni. Why is that? Because Agni represents our, physically represents fire. In a more subtle way, also our digestive fire, but more subtly is also our divine willpower, basic willpower. So we say this, right? Like today, Mirabelle is on fire. It means that today you're pretty determined to get stuff done. So it's that same sentiment you can apply to Agni Devata. He's your divine will. Without willpower, what can you do? Therefore, Agni becomes the hotaram, the invoker. Agni is the priest who goes and brings other deities. In your symbolic yajna, or in your symbolic journey, Agni is the one who is the priest. He brings other deities. Because if you don't have willpower, you cannot do anything else. So this is the importance of Agni. In fact, for me, when I learned the first 9 mantras of Rig Veda, because the way I understand cosmic deities or anything in the Veda is by learning the mantras related to it first. So if you want to learn Saraswati, my teacher would say, there are 74 times that Saraswati appears in the Rig Veda. You have to learn all those mantras. Then you understand Saraswati. So you have to study about 300 mantras of Rig. In fact, there are 2,000 mantras to Agni in the Rig Veda. There are about 2,500 mantras to Indra in the Rig Veda. There are a total of 10,500 mantras in the Rig Veda. So you can imagine such like 50% of it is mantras to Agni and Indra. So it tells us we need to work a lot with these two deities. Indra is the Lord of the divine mind, so to speak. He helps us develop our indriyas to have a safe and strong spiritual practice. And so Indra's function is to build strength physical and subtle, because otherwise we're like an uncooked, unbaked pot. You try to store something in an unbaked pot, it will either dissolve or break, or, so you need to bake this pot so it can then hold something like knowledge. That's the idea. And all the other deities then, are become more and more and more attractive. So the idea is, through the mantras of the Veda, we get to know and become conscious of, or as my teacher says, we birth Agni in us, which means it's the first time that you become aware of Agni in you, and then we grow it, we develop it. And in fact, my practice that I offer to all our students, Veda studies, the logo is inspired by Agni Devata. So you see the little fire in the logo is from Agni Devata, because when I first started to build the platform, that's the first thing my teacher told me. He said, you should never feel like you don't have the resources to do something. And I was just so, so stunned with what he said. And then when I understand the mantras of Agni and this whole thing of just grow your willpower, that is what you need. And all other resources, devatas, will come to you. They're resources. And you can start collaborating with these divine forces to, every step of the way, you feel like you're not alone. You feel like you have a whole team, sort of conspiring for your success, and it's a great way to live, I have to say. And I'm extremely grateful that every day I get to wake up, and every moment I have this sense of overwhelming gratitude for all the support I get in what I do. And it's thanks to the devatas, and so Agni and Indra reign over there,
Yeah, I totally resonate with you. I mean, even this summit, the way it's coming together, and it's just that one guidance. It's a nanosecond of some feeling and realizing this is what you have to do. Next longer moment is like, how? And then after that, with the trust, it just all comes together. So I totally resonate with you and in all that you've just shared. Just like to I just maybe just two more questions. One is about, one thing that really struck me about Veda chanting was that I always felt like they were chanting from their nose. And I was like, why are they sounding so strange? Could you share if there's like there's a reason for like why they all sound like that?
I mean, technically speaking, if you read the Shiksha texts, they tell us very clearly that only the nasalized sounds should be nasalized, and not everything should be nasalized, etc. So technically that is the case, but in practice, in tradition, you'll find especially those who are chanting for long periods of time, a lot of pandits especially, they sound nasal. But if you listen to my gurus, the Challakere brothers, they don't sound so nasal. They have a more, like a deeper resonance than nasal. But the nasal chanting has its use and purpose. So it's not for waste. Because these pandits are chanting for hours and hours and hours every day. They have learned the technique of not using the vocal cords or straining the vocal cords through the chanting. They engage the abdomen and they use the nasal passage for the chanting. And so then they're able to chant for a long period of time in a powerful way. That's really what's going on. So it's not that you must chant in a nasal way, but you do protect your voice box by doing that. And that's what they do. And some others have actually developed so much inner strength, so much prana, that they can keep chanting for hours. I mean, my mother is an example. She would be teaching so many classes per day. And her voice was like, had this boom to it, like a real strength to it. And she was like a little lady, She wasn't like a tall, big lady or something, but she had such a huge voice, for that. And I think that the chanting develops that for you. It develops a type of strength that you wouldn't get, I think, even from traditional pranayama. Because, I mean, I know a lot of yoga and pranayama teachers who still struggle with breath and voice while chanting, not while doing pranayama. You may be able to do all kinds of, mechanical sort of, sequences in pranayama. But chanting, with the long exhalation, but also with the spikes for the Mahaprana sounds, I think requires another level of inner strength and, let's say, what do you call it, steadiness, which, and the Pandits have mastered sort of their, not hurting their voices by nasalized chanting. That's really what's going on.
Thank you for sharing that. And, separately, there's so much research about, what's happening with certain pranayams and with nitric oxide and, all of those benefits. So there's definitely a lot to explore and discover here. Do you have any guidance just as we close, just to offer for students who would want to do Veda chanting as pranayam? Where can they begin? What guidance would you offer them?
I mean, what I would tell people is, first of all, pray for a good teacher. I mean, I think that is the starting point, to really have deeply an aspiration to learn it in a traditional way, not someone who's making it easy for you. So go through the rigor of it, and learn a little bit about the background. So you will automatically come to honor its roots and honor, the process the rishis went through to, to have these revelations and to understand it, more deeply than just something to recite and to share with a group or a class or so on, to go into it deeply and to give it your all, So if you're from your native language doesn't have these aspirated sounds, I teach a lot of different nationalities, and some languages don't have aspirated sounds, but I see people work on it so beautifully, so well. It's so inspiring that actually it doesn't matter. You don't have to be Indian to be good at this. I have students from 30 different nationalities, and so many are chanting so beautifully. It doesn't matter your mother tongue. If you're able to concentrate, pay attention to these subtleties, to this Mahaprana, what are the mechanics involved in me producing this Mahaprana sound? Learn it, go that deep. Start with short mantras. Start with Shanti mantras. Just learn the Shanti mantras correctly, because these are the most popularly chanted, in yoga classes and elsewhere, but learn those correctly. Learn one month. If there are two mantras that you want to do japa with, those would be Gayatri Mantra, Mahamrityunjaya Mantra. Learn them correctly with the correct Vedic phonetics. Learn the Vedic sort of pronunciation of it, not a musical version of it. Because, I mean, nothing bad will happen to anyone by singing these mantras, etc. It's not a moralistic good and bad thing, but it's about, do you want to practice Veda and benefit from the benefits, have the benefits of Veda chanting? Then go into it and learn it correctly and recite it. Do japa with the correct swara, matra, the aspirated sounds and all of it. And then watch your body tingle with, this resonating beauty of the Rishi-born mantras. So that is the only thing I would encourage and, inspire people to learn, is to learn the correct mantras in the correct way and put some effort into it and offer, enjoy. It's so gratifying when you put all your effort into one thing, in ekagrata, single point of focus, and you feel very, very good afterwards. That is guaranteed.
Yeah, and we definitely need it in our days of, the world where we are now with all the distraction. Concentration is like ekagrata is so vital, so vital. Thank you so much, Shantala, for this absolutely enlightening conversation. The depth of your practice and your knowledge and your desire to truly share this, it really comes across. So thank you so much for all that you've shared.
Thank you so much, Mirabel. And if it's okay with you, I'll stop also with the Shanti mantra.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
And I hope we get to talk again, maybe another time. And it's been so enjoyable. You've been a wonderful host.
Thank
And it's
you.
really lovely talking to you. So I'll close with Purnamadaha. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.